I want to talk about a short journey here, and I'm going to talk for a few minutes, and then I'll turn it over to Dave. We want to talk about the past, the present, and the future of media. And we're not going to be all-inclusive because we've only got 18 minutes, but we kind of want to paint a picture of where we've been, where we are, and where we think we could be. I always like to start that off with thinking about the good old days. And is there anybody that works in advertising in the room? I've worked with a lot of advertisers, and this is kind of what I think of when I think of the good old days, right? We had a very specific way that we thought about doing things. We understood the world, or at least we thought we did. And we had some pretty traditional things we did, right? We cared about radio. We cared about the great print ad, right? And we even cared about television. One of our challenges, though, with that world is it still matters today, right? I mean, it still works. It's important for us. And if we think of this, right? 106 million people watched the last episode of MASH. That was all the way back in 1983. This was a show that in the US, more people watched than any other show. And you kind of think that, boy, television and broadcast, its glory days are behind it, right? It's not entirely true, though. 98 million people actually watched the Super Bowl last February. This was just a few months ago, right? So there's still a really powerful set of mediums, and even things that maybe we think aren't important are still pretty important in reaching a large audience. And even if we think of things like the Olympics. In Beijing, 114 million people in the US actually watched the Olympics. But it brings to mind something that I think about that is important, especially when we think about where we are in the world right now. And one of my favorite authors is William Gibson. And many of us have probably heard this quote about the future is already here, and it's just unevenly distributed. When we start looking at new media, this is a really interesting conversation when we look at everybody that uses media and how they're influenced, but maybe not quite in the way that you think. And when I say that the world and the future is unevenly distributed, I may not mean it in the way that you think I do. So as an example, there's 253 million people in this country that use the internet, more than any other country in the world. Do you know what country that is, Dave?
The other country in the world?
Yes.
No.
Mm-hmm. Actually, 253 million people use the internet in China. It's 30 million more people than use it in the United States right now. In fact, in China, internet usage over the past 8 years has grown 1,000%. It's done the same thing in Indonesia. It's done the same thing in Iran. It's done the same thing in Turkey. And in countries like Pakistan, it's grown 12,000%. There are 1.5 billion people in the world that use the internet. This is out of a population of 6.5 billion people. Only 15% of that population is here in the US. This is an important thing to think about when we think about the internet as a mechanism for media and how we communicate and content. And it kind of begs the question, right, that we, people that produce media and consume it, need ideas that can scale to reach this audience. And we need to get away from this model, right, this one-to-many model, or even this model, to reach people much more broadly than we can right now, but do it effectively in a way that accepts the diversity that we have in the world. So one way to look at this and see what might be in the future is to look at some of the things that happened with the Olympics this year. One of the things that happened in the US is that NBC actually used Silverlight technology to broadcast a lot of content online. And when I say a lot, I'll cover that in a second, because it's important to understand that something fundamental happened at the Olympics this year that's never happened with new media before, and that is we had big ideas that scaled. So for example, over 17 days, there's over 1.3 billion page views. This was a 475% increase over Athens, just in the amount of people that looked at stuff. There's over 50 million unique visitors to the actual properties. But what gets really interesting is what they did. There was over 70 million streams of video that people watched. And people that watched that video spent about 27 minutes watching it online. Do you know how long most people spend watching video online, Dave, on average?
Me or most people?
Most people.
No, I don't.
It's about 3 minutes. So not only were people watching video online, they were watching it longer than they ever had before. And there's actually 10 million hours of video watched just in the US through NBC's site. There were 35 million mobile page views and 50,000 plus clips viewed every day. This is pretty important to think about because if we look at all of the mediums that we use traditionally for the Olympics, over 3,600 hours of content was put online by NBC, and over 2,900 hours of it was streamed live. Compare this to just a few short years ago in Athens when the Olympics was there. There were 115,000 streams that were executed on the very first day of the Olympics. This year, there were 3.6 million the first day in the US. And it makes you wonder, doesn't it? What's going to happen 8 years from now when the Olympics gets done again? What is the impact of new media going to be on that? Are we even going to recognize what can happen? So that's kind of the recent past, right? That just happened a month ago. What are things like in the world today that we need to think about? And I think there's 3 trends that are really important for all of us to think about. We probably know what they are, right? One of them is technology. It's really important to understand what technology can do because it's a moving bar, right? Technology can do new things all the time. It's our job and our burden to understand what it is. But also business is important too, right? It's understanding what makes good business sense. Most of you folks probably know what this is. It's a ClearRx bottle for Target. It's a brilliantly designed bottle, and there's a wonderful story about the designer, Deborah Adler, and how she designed it. But what's most interesting is why, as a business, Target chose to use this bottle, and that it actually improved their business. And that's another burden that we have, right, is to understand the business value of the things that we do. But then finally, there's this other thing we have to care about. It's people. It's us and what we like to do. And you know, the basic way to understand this, and you probably understand this from David's talk earlier, but it's understand that somebody that loves this is completely different than somebody that loves this. And understanding those unique differences between people. And I'm going to submit that we're on a collision course right now. And we're on a collision course because the way that I want to communicate and use media and share things has changed dramatically in the past few years as a consumer. And the way that I share things and the way that I create things, and even the way that I want ownership over things, right? I don't want people to make things for me to listen to. I want people to give me things that I can reinterpret myself, is fundamentally at odds with how we do a lot of things. And these are collisions are kind of a new black in terms of how we all need to integrate. And when we think of traditional media partners and we think of what a lot of us do in the room, I think fundamentally we're challenged today by new media and how we work. And this is in media. It's in marketing. It's in conversations, and it's in our culture. And there's some risk here for all of us, right? There's a lot of mature institutions that have a rich heritage in media in Chicago. But the world is changing. And one of the most important things, and it's why I think this summit is so important, is that risk needs friends, right? We all need to work together to understand how to address this world. And we're all just getting started. If we think of some of the things that are going to happen in the world, understanding where people are located and using mapping services and how that relates to media is fundamentally going to alter a lot of the experiences that we have or that we create for people. If we think of how we share artifacts and things with people in an online mechanism, there are fascinating new technologies that we can actually use to do that. And then finally, when we think about how we share things as simple as photographs to recreate experiences for everybody else, there are fundamental things that are going to change when we do that. For example, how many of us actually went to China to see the Olympics? There's probably 1 or 2 of us in the room. Most of us, experienced them through media, right? We experienced what that event was going to be like through media. And the way that we do that is going to change. And then finally, the way that we teach people is going to change too. So what I'd like to do is introduce my colleague up here, David, who's going to talk a little bit about tomorrow. And we're going to talk about it in the context of the future of democracy. Because we all have special burdens in this room. And our special burdens are to help change the world, right? And make Chicago a focal point for how we can change the world and bring the world together. And Dave is actually from Synergy, and he's going to show something that was created last year with a design challenge called Fizz Pop. So without further ado, Dave.
Thanks, Chris. So there was the challenge, right? Build a social engagement platform for the 21st century citizen. And if you start thinking of politics today in the 21st century, you start thinking of the Founding Fathers. And it's pretty clear when you look back at the Founding Fathers that the rock star of the bunch was Ben Franklin, right? He was funny, curious, smart, flirty, and incredibly social. If he were alive today, he clearly would be blogging constantly, and every one of us would be following his Twitter feed. So we stepped back and said, let's use Ben, and let's think about the problems in politics. It's about how do we be informed, and how do we be involved as citizens today. And that lets me introduce you to our friend, Ben. Ben is a connected suite of applications believing firmly that it's not just about the browser online from a single PC. We're talking about the right device for the right person on the right part of the network. So the first part I'll introduce you to is Ben Online. Ben is a Silverlight application that lets you both be informed and be involved in politics. Now, part of the problem with news and information being informed is there's so much of it, right? We have feeds, and feeds become streams, and streams become rivers, and pretty soon everything is overwhelming. So Ben's job at first was in an automated way to churn through all this news and information and extract stories that we might find interesting so that we could jump in and read those stories. That's pretty straightforward, right? And Ben would do this based on our personal profile. Now, the other challenge, though, is as I read information and read news, I want to know about it. I want to know about its sources. So I can not only see a news item, but what if I could begin to visualize information about the news? So what are my sources for news or information? Ends up, we can very quickly, in a blink of an eye, through visualization, see NPR, PBS, and ABC. Now, if I jump to the most popular, we see a drastic change. And if I jump immediately more to dig even deeper and see what other respondents had thought were the most balanced, they're even more different. Being able to instantly blink and visualize and break out of the traditional layouts and designs give us some real background information about the information and news. If I go back to the news, we can carry these visualizations even farther. I can go in and read a story, but not only can I read a story, when I'm reading a story, I might want to read other stories. And I may want to read them based on where they lie in the left to right political spectrum. What if I could immediately visualize? So we can jump in. This story that I was just reading was marked as somewhat centrist. So it says, the Fed's hands are full trying to fight recession and inflation. If we look to the story to the left, we see Obama slams Bush and McCain on the economy. If I look to stories immediately to the right, Bush denies there is a recession. You got to trust Ben, right? But immediately I can say, what's the story just to the left or a little further to the left? How popular were they? What was everybody else reading? Let me see the contrarian opinions. And these visualizations can continue on as well. You'll see in blogs today that traditionally we see blog comments as this linear stream, but they're not linear streams, right? They're these webs of conversations. And they're not just text, but what if they could be video? And that video could include things like sarcasm and inflection and the things we don't get in a blog today. So bringing together all these media types into a platform. And then once we become informed, the next step is to get involved, where I could hook into things like live services and begin to see events going on in my community. And I could jump from these events to actually getting involved in one of them. Let me introduce you to Little Ben. The idea of Little Ben is that you could run it on your desktop and actually join meetings. Go into Microsoft Virtual Earth, begin to surf for meetings, find them on your map, join them, integrate with the webcam, etc. And then finally, once you went to a meeting, what if you could very quickly browse for information and begin to read stories, say integrated into Facebook? And what if when reading those stories, if we became very animated about them, so on this particular story, I could say, you know what? I want to do what my grandmother used to do. My grandmother would sit around and watch television, and she would watch Walter Cronkite, and when she got excited or motivated by a story, they'd walk and pick up the phone and call somebody. We don't do that anymore, right? It's interesting that technology has taken away our engagement, but through experience in technology, we thought we could bring it back. So at South by Southwest in the finals last year, we demonstrated something that had never been seen before, which was we made an actual voice over IP phone call out of Facebook. We can see the idea of being involved in an experience that was targeted at the right location for the right person, the right place on the network. So that was Ben. To kind of close the loop on the challenge. The challenge was exactly what you're seeing here: build a social engagement platform for the 21st century citizen. You need to design it, you need to concept it, design it, build it, and pitch it, and you have 30 days. And so when you come up to take a look at Ben, understand this was a team of 3 in 30 days. that built this whole platform, and the new media environment makes that possible.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.